Hello and welcome to Sky News Review of the Week with me, Jayne Secker, and the odd couple of Fleet Street, Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Andrew Pierce, Consultant Editor of the Daily Mail. Well, Kevin always likes to say that Andrew is on the right when it comes to politics and that he's just right. But you can pretty much guarantee that whatever news story we discuss in the next half hour, they won't agree. Before we get started, let's get a taste of what the week was all about.
More than 280 workers died at a mine in Turkey. The disaster sparked violent protests against the government and its poor safety record. The teenage cancer campaigner Stephen Sutton died after raising millions of pounds for charity in just a few weeks. David Cameron went on a charm offensive in Scotland while the coalition went to war over free schools and free school dinners. The Education Secretary was accused of being a zealot, but Michael Gove says he's now made peace with the Lib Dems.
So you and Nick Clegg have kissed and made up, have you? You could say that.
There were celebrations as Man City came out on top again. The Premier League boss Richard Scudamore was under fire for sending sexist emails. Two regions in eastern Ukraine declared themselves independent in a vote recognised by nobody. Conchita Wurst came home a heroine after winning Eurovision. The cross-dressing singer had faced opposition from Russia. She had this message for President Putin.
I said it clear, we are unstoppable.
And a heroic cat in California won our hearts after saving its young owner from a dog attack.
Eurovision is that time of year, isn't it? What did you make of Conchita? A worthy winner? What did you think of the song?
I can't remember the song, but I thought she was a worthy winner just for being brave enough to wear a frock and have a beard. I'm saying she. Should I be saying he?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to offend anybody by making that call.
I love Eurovision, though.
She says she.
Yeah.
Do you think it showed us that we are all a bit more open-minded?
I think we are, and we've got to celebrate that. We were laughing with, not at. Yeah. Tackles prejudice. If you can make an enemy of some Russian... really horrible people, well, that's not bad in their leadership. And I just wonder if we're going to win in Britain, maybe we'll just have to bring out Sandy Shaw from retirement and stick a beard on her or something, because we never get anywhere.
We saw loads of different celebrities tweeting pictures of themselves with beards, which was very funny, I thought. It was great.
Well, Russell Brand, wasn't it? He was very clever about it.
Nigella Lawson was one of the early winners. But more serious story this week, a change of government in India.
Yeah, could it be the end of that Gandhi dynasty? And of course, it looks like BJP, big majority. New Prime Minister Modi. Now, he's got a reputation for sectarian politics, Hindu nationalist in the past, links to the killings of Muslims in riots, and there were travel bans on him in many parts of the world until recently. So, is it good for India? I'm not sure.
It was the scale of the election which is awesome. A population of 1.2 billion. It's taken them more than a week to count the votes. We're going to the polls in Britain on Thursday, European elections. Half the population, 500 million, though it feels to me like most of them have moved to Britain. And it's going to take us 4 days to count the votes.
We're going to be talking about immigration in a little while, so let's not get into it too soon.
Yeah.
Let's take a look in more detail at some of the stories that you've picked out for us. These are the stories we've picked out during the week, and we're starting with the dreadful story coming from Turkey, and this is the mine disaster. 282 miners, it's now believed to have died.
There's still possibly more miners trapped beneath the ground. We don't know whether they're alive or dead, but the most remarkable political aspect to this is the complete incompetence of the Turkish Prime Minister, who went to the scene of the mining disaster, described it as rather ordinary, then had the cheek to compare it to two 19th century mining disasters in Britain, when of course the owners of the mines didn't care a fig about the welfare of their miners. All they cared about was profits. And then there's been riots around the Prime Minister. One of his aides was reportedly trying to kick protesters. I predict this, he'll be gone in days.
It does seem to be spectacularly badly handled, on top of the fact that it is obviously an enormous tragedy and desperate for these families who still haven't got answers.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister's behaving like an old Ottoman sultan who didn't care about his people. And yes, I think he'll get a reaction. But he's been on the side of private business and a real rip-roaring Turkish success story in one way, if you look at economic growth, but it's often at the cost of health and safety. Mine safety is very poor, it's been privatised, it's happening across the construction industry, and I hope he'll get an electoral backlash. He deserves to get an electoral backlash for this, and for once I agree with him. But people died in mining disasters in Britain in so many numbers in the 19th century because there was no health and safety and lives were considered cheap.
Let's move to Nigeria now, another desperate story of the week. This is, of course, the ongoing search for these schoolgirls, nearly 300 schoolgirls. We saw this footage. We don't know how these girls are now. We don't know what happened to the rest of the girls, do we?
Yeah, and the terrorists, Islamist terrorists, that's what they are in Boko Haram, a really backward, theocratic book, parading the girls, making them wear their head covers, making them convert to Islam. And they're kind of the Ku Klux Klan of the Muslim world.
Let's just take a look at the video that has emerged this week of the girls in a bit more detail.
This will be tortuous viewing for the parents of the missing students. Young girls believed to be those snatched in the middle of the night, paraded by Boko Haram as new converts to Islam. All those in the video are wearing hijabs, the Muslim headdress, and chanting prayers in both the local language Hausa and Arabic. They're in what looks like a rural location and appear quite composed given the circumstances. One of the girls stands up and, looking nervous, recites a prayer. Others are asked their names and their religion. And the cameraman can be glimpsed with a gun over his shoulder. The Boko Haram leader is not seen with them, but he taunts the authorities for 17 minutes about his captives.
Well, that was our special correspondent Alex Crawford, who's been covering the story from Borno State in Nigeria. And there are whole villages, aren't there, that have lost all of their daughters now?
Yeah, and the conduct of these terrorists is absolutely sinister. And again, there's a complete lack of complete political failure, just as we saw in Turkey. The president of Nigeria was due to go and visit the area where the girls have been taken from, and he's cancelled the visit. Apparently he's got more pressing business in Paris, where presumably his wife can go shopping down the Champs-Élysées.
There has been this whole Western protest, hashtag bring back our girls. Do you think that's made any difference? I
do. I think it's made the Nigerian government sit up and take some action, and I think it's deplorable that Goodluck Jonathan's not going to the area. Well, there is an international summit in Paris to try and get other countries, and Britain and US will be represented, to try and get a greater effort. But no, people of the world woke up the Nigerian government. So I think that's quite inspiring, and I know you're always sort of look down your nose at people who hold up posters and so on, but sometimes it does have.
Well, it hasn't rescued them, has it?
No, but it's.
And politicians keep saying we can do everything we can, and John Kerry, the most powerful man on the planet after the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, said we're going to do everything we can. What have they done? Nothing. They've talked, and Mrs. Obama has tweeted the odd picture. That's very reassuring.
You don't just dismiss it like that. What ordinary people... people do care.
Of course they do. But they've not done anything to release these girls. They may have to come to the conclusion they're going to have to put military in there.
Well, look, there are more people hunting with surveillance planes, drones, people on the ground now than there were before. And that is because people around the world stood up and demanded action be taken.
Let's move on to politics now. And an exclusive poll for Sky News has suggested that UKIP is on course for a major victory in this month's European elections. Our deputy political editor, Joey Jones, has been taking a look at the numbers.
Talk is of Nigel Farage's party at the moment, and with good reason. Let's not forget, they're not even a fixture at Westminster, but when you look at this, our Euro polling, it tells a very good tale for UKIP. There they are, up on 31%, with Labour 6 points back on 25, Conservatives 23, and the Lib Dems on a near embarrassing 9% there. But of course, momentum is always critical, and there again, it points only one way, a significant, steady rise for UKIP since the beginning of the year, from the mid-20s up to that 31%. The Tories and the Lib Dems are actually reasonably static, which means that the worries are really on the Labour side. You have to look at this for a slide from the beginning of the year. They were over 30% there, and now right down to around 25 in this latest Sky poll, which suggests that the votes are actually coming off Labour and going to UKIP, which demonstrates that UKIP are a threat to Labour and the Tories alike.
They're a threat to everybody, aren't they? I mean, do you think this could be their best ever result?
It looks like it. Of course, Farage has said he thinks he'll top the poll. If he comes second now, it'll look like a disappointment. And you've got to go back to 1984, 30 years. since an opposition party didn't top the poll. I mean, the main opposition, which in this case would be Labour. If Labour don't do it, it'll be a bloke to Ed Miliband, unquestionably.
Well, he's had a terrible week because the polls have been bleak and gloomy for him. In one poll on Europe, not the Sky one, actually Labour were in third place behind the Conservatives, so that would be a catastrophe. But generally in the polls, twice now this week, for the first time in 2 years, the Tories have gone ahead of the Labour Party. I don't know why Maguire's laughing. And the real worry for Labour and his lot is that Cameron's lead over Miliband in personal approval ratings is widening, and on the economy, they're 15 points ahead, because his lot have got no ideas at all.
Tory boy, you ignore all the polls that put Labour first.
It was a poll.
It was
a Guardian poll. Your favourite paper.
You also ignore the fact that the two polls you seize on would have still made Labour the biggest party in Parliament.
It's symbolism, Maguire. The Tories are getting their nose ahead, and as Joey Jones' poll showed, there's no doubt Labour's support is going down because people have rumbled the two heads. They ain't up to it.
Next week I'm going to bring a baler here so you can clutch at lots of straws, because that's all you do.
Well, all this talk brings us very nicely onto our gaffe of the week, and Labour have not fared well. Andrew, talk us through what you picked.
Well, there you are. There's one of their posters. Heaven knows how much they spent getting the finest brains in the Labour Party involved. £450 extra on your shopping bill, and there's lots of food in the poster. There is no VAT on food. And Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor, took great delight in saying that the poster had gone horribly wrong, because he's at war with Douglas Alexander, who is Labour's election coordinator, because he thinks the entire strategy is wrong. Embarrassing.
It is. It's a silly error. Some of those things are cleaning products and that. Yes, there's VAT on, but let's not miss the big picture, which is that a family is paying £1,350 more in VAT as a result. Let's not miss that big picture.
But what about the other image, the two peas of the pod? Do you not think that's quite a powerful image?
Well, they're trying to say, aren't they, that this is Labour attacking the Liberal Democrats the whole time in the European election. I think that's the wrong thing to attack. They're on 9%. They don't need to be attacked anymore. And he's just trying to say that Clegg is Cameron's... It's a bit like going back to the SDP when the spitting image had David Steele in David Owen's top pocket. That's what they're trying to get. I'm not sure it really works.
All these cultural reference points are from the 1980s.
Well, we're staying with Labour for the other gaffe of the week, and this is one that you've chosen, Kevin, and this is Austin Mitchell. Now, he was talking about the proposed takeover of AstraZeneca by Pfizer and compared it to rape. Let's just hear what he said. Let's read his tweet. Cameron dare not stop Pfizer because he dare not offend the US in any way. Roll up rapists. A few hours later, he said, naughty me, substitute rapaciousness, before any more Pfizer defenders weigh in.
Silly mistake. He's a very decent guy, Austin Mitchell, but you make a mistake like that, it's offensive language. Apologise. And then you can move on, but he wouldn't apologise. He dug in, made a big mistake. He's retiring at the election.
Amazing, though, the Labour sisterhood you would imagine to pile in on this. If it had been a Conservative MP, Harriet Harman would have been banging the drum saying it's outrageous, the Tories shouldn't be belittling rape. Nothing from Labour's shadow culture spokesman at all.
You know why? Because it was an organised move by the Conservative Party to make it party political, and they got a whole load of Tory...
It's called politics, Kevin.
Yeah, but come on.
He was asked to apologise, and he's refused. This is what he said.
No, I won't apologise. Why should I? That's to give way to the other side. If you want to apologise for everything was said incorrectly, I'd ask all those Conservative MPs who've been talking about the rape of the countryside and all those environmentalists who've been talking about the rape of the rainforest to apologise too. So you can't apologise for everything. It may not be politically correct, but it's said now. I think, the threat to AstraZeneca is still there, and we shouldn't ignore that by concentrating on this.
I have to say, Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor, unlike Kevin, said he should have apologised.
No, I said he should apologise. No, don't misrepresent me, mate. I think he should. And digging in, just seeing it as trench warfare with the other side is wrong. You got it wrong. Just say it. I'm sorry. I should have used a better term.
We'll see. Right, bit of a teaser for you both now. Who was it who said this?
It's awkward, is what it is. But I say that, and I still sort of have respect, and I want them to know that the performance was done with love.
I think they know. We'll find out who it was in just a few moments.
It's awkward, is what it is. But I say that, and I still sort of have respect, and I want them to know that the performance was done with love.
It was done with love. This is a performance in the biopic Grace of Monaco.
Fact check. Now, well, the other significant thing, apart from that appalling performance at the press conference,
we should say that she's responding to criticism because they said it's very wooden acted and it hasn't stuck really
to facts.
Face looks wooden.
Well, that's the thing. What's happened to her face? That's the talking point of Monaco, not the terrible film. What she's had it Botox to death, hasn't she? She cannot move anything. She's had more than Maguire.
More than you, Andrew.
I haven't had any.
He's actually had Botox, didn't he? But he had it under his arms because they were sweaty.
Oh, please.
Sorry, too much information.
Too much information. Let's move on now to the European Court of Justice that this week has ruled that people have the right to be forgotten, you might want to forget that, online, with huge implications for Google and other search engines. Well, Sky's technology correspondent Tom Cheshire explains.
16 years ago, a Spanish man went bankrupt and put his house up for auction. When he Googled his name, that's the information that came up first. He sued Google because he argued that information was no longer relevant but was damaging his reputation. And now, a European court has agreed, and it's ordered Google to remove any of that information from its indexes.
This ruling has huge implications for Google.
It is now saying the role that Google has in collating and displaying that information when you put a search request in is potentially unlawful.
And that could be a threat to freedom of speech. Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, said on Twitter, "When will a European court demand that Wikipedia censor an article with truthful information because an individual doesn't like it?" Others will see it differently. This is a way of reclaiming at least part of their digital existence for themselves, wiping the slate clean.
So what do you think? I mean, there are some reservations, clearly, but it can be incredibly...
Some reservations. I think it's the most appalling invasion and encroachment on free speech ever. Typical of the European Union. What's it got to do with them anyway? Why are they telling us what we can and can't do here? And you know, in the 3 days since that ruling, 20 convicts have applied to have their records blanked out, including one involved in child porn, child paedophilia, and a politician who's seeking re-election. You know who this is going to benefit? People who've got something to hide.
But what about people who are victims of domestic violence? What about people who... Bad things have happened to them in the past, not their own fault, and they don't want it to follow them for the rest of their lives?
Well, I'm sorry, it's called free speech, and you can't censor it out. You can't censor out history.
I always prefer free speech to censorship, and on this, I think it's a perverse ruling. If something is true, and it's out there in the open, it's out there. What you want to cover it up. Where will you stop? Because the people who will use it aren't the people you give an example of, say, somebody a victim of domestic violence. It'll be crooks. It'll be politicians with shady pasts. People you should know about.
The man with the duck house will probably want that kicked out of Google. The MP who claimed for his duck house. Where will it stop?
Yeah. Indeed. Right, let's move on to the newspaper stories of the week. And there are lots and lots to get through. We're starting with, now this is desperately sad, Stephen Sutton. Of course, we've spoken about him before, and he finally lost his fight for life this week.
It was.
Without raising the most extraordinary sum of money.
Yeah, more than £4 million. 19, he lived life to the full of zest, and I felt teary when I heard he died because he was an inspirational figure, and he was a credit to humanity. And it shows you we often knock young people, and they make the headlines when things go wrong, and of course are involved in some type of script. But he was just a positive figure, and I think we've all benefited from just knowing about his story.
And the tweet from his mother was heartbreaking. She said her heart was bursting with pride, but it was breaking in half too because having lost a son far too young.
But you think that they must take some comfort from what he's achieved and what an extraordinary life he's had, even though it was very, very short.
And it's reminded a lot of us, because I don't think I'd really worked that one out, that how many young people do die of leukemia and cancer.
No, and all that money he's raised will help them. So, I mean, a fantastic legacy.
Right, moving on to teachers. Andrew, this is a story that you picked out. It's all about what we call teachers, what people should be calling their teachers. One professor says that she's concerned that Miss is not on the same level as Sir.
Ridiculous academic. I mean, I grew up calling my teacher Miss, or as actually I was in a Catholic school, sometimes I had to call her sister. So you call none sister anymore if this professor has her way, because that's sexist. It's ridiculous.
Well,
you should call them Miss and call them Sir.
You're an old reactionary.
Well, let's hear from her. She's called Professor of Language and Linguistics at Roehampton University, Jen Coates, and this is what she says.
Sir suggests that the person being named Sir deserves very high respect.
Yes.
Whereas Miss is a very down-to-earth term. It's just a term that usually means a woman is either young or unmarried.
Do you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, language matters. We've just been discussing Austin Mitchell, the Labour MP, getting it wrong and condemned him. Sir gives you status. A knight. It was what kids used to call their fathers. Miss goes back in schools to the time when teachers, female teachers, weren't allowed to be married until 1944.
Six-year-olds don't know anything about knights of the realm and lords.
This week saying, as long as the kids aren't saying "or you," they actually don't care what they're called as long as it's polite.
When I used to live in the East End of London, I remember talking to some children, and they called their teacher by their first name, and I thought that was quite sad actually, because I think there should be a distance between the teacher and the child, because the teacher's imposing the discipline and the authority.
In the Far East, it's the teacher's surname and teacher Brown, Teacher Smith.
Well, if you did that the same for men and women, yeah, great, fine, that's all right. But at the moment, you've got a two-tier system.
Politically correct.
No,
here we go.
Political correctness is actually about respect, showing people respect.
It's absurd.
And showing them equal
And if
respect.
you did a poll on that, I think there'd be 80% saying it's fine to call a miss.
You normally complain about polls.
Well, we were talking about polls about immigration earlier, and we're back onto immigration now. This was the one that you picked out, Kevin. This is about the number of Romanians and Bulgarians that have come to the country since all of the plans were relaxed at the beginning of the year.
That's right. And despite all those scare stories about a flood, 29 million, it dropped by 4,000. You were wrong, and you should just accept you were wrong and apologise.
Actually, can I just say I did not say 29 million would come in. That was
you were part of that scare industry.
But can I just point out to Maguire, who conveniently forgets, that this time, compared to this time last year, there are 30,000 more Romanians and Bulgarians living in Britain, because I think all the publicity about them coming here meant they came anyway, and there are 115,000 more Poles.
Fewer.
There are fewer, I admit. But there are 100...
Sorry, can you just say that? Fewer, you admit. Come on.
There are 160,000 more Eastern Europeans here. These rules have to be stopped. It's crazy. We've got 2.2 million people on the dole, and it's falling quite fast, and about 2 million, over 2 million, have flooded in since his lot changed the rules and didn't bring in transitional arrangements. And it's a real problem, and it'll be a big issue in the European elections on Thursday and a big issue at the general election, which is why his leader, Ed Miliband, has finally got round to saying they got it wrong.
One of the reasons it'll be a big issue is because you keep inflaming it.
No,
keep
discussing
there are almost as many Britons in the rest of the European Union as there are other people from the European Union in Britain.
The left don't want a discussion about immigration. They don't want a discussion about immigration because they know they're badly out of sync with the public.
I'm going to move on because you could talk for half an hour about immigration. I know you could. Well, thanks very much for taking us through your papers. Very quickly, what about your People of the Week? We're starting with you, Andrew, and this is your first choice. Good week for George Osborne, apparently.
Yeah, great economic statistics came out. Employment is the highest it's been in Britain since records began in 1971, and he's made Ed Balls look a complete idiot again.
Tory boy picks a Tory.
There you go, there's a surprise. Bad week, you've chosen... Again, no surprise.
Yeah, Tory boy picks Labour.
You can't just pick them every week.
I promise you, but his ratings, Ed Miliband's ratings, continue to decline. They're sinking faster than ever. And the big American guru who's come over, David Axelrod, who was supposed to be here to talk about strategy, is now here to try to show Ed Miliband how to look ordinary on TV. Too late.
On to your choices now, Kevin. And you picked... Good week for Rory Stewart?
Yeah, those who fear there's not enough Aldertonians in public life, there we are. The Tory MP is being elected chair of the Defence Committee. He's actually knowledgeable on the subject, having worked in the Foreign Office and once walked across Afghanistan and lots of other countries, so good for him.
But bad week for, and perhaps no surprise,
tax dodger Gary Barlow. Take that OBE away and make him pay his tax.
There he goes, off he goes, down to the bottom of the list. Thanks very much. Well, thanks so much for joining us for this week's review of the week. And don't forget that you can catch Andrew and Kevin in action on the Sky News Press Preview, along with our other paper reviewers as they take a first look at the day's newspapers every evening at 10:30 and 11:30 on Sky News. And we'll be back with more next time from Fleet Street's Odd Couple. So for now, it's goodbye from them.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.